Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Sassy Talks. I have a very special guest today with me. I met this guy in one of the S11S meetups that we were doing in Mumbai, and thankfully I met him. I think I almost spent about 45 minutes, almost a length of a podcast or
Yeah.
in during that meetup. And it was so interesting that I had to call him to this podcast. This is Kyle D'Souza. Guys, he's a demand gen expert, to be very honest. He spent almost 8 years in the industry working with companies like a Group M, iProspect, and even CleverTap. So he has a lot to offer with respect to the insight. So, Kyle, welcome to the Sassy Talks. I am pretty excited to have you on this podcast. How are you feeling today?
I'm good, Ishan. Thanks a lot for having me. It's first time I'm doing something like this, so please bear with me if I
No
kind of
problems.
mistake or something. Yeah.
No
Great,
problems.
great.
Really excited. I think it is the podcast is not really about how you present yourself or how you talk about things, right? I think it's more about the insights that you can give. Like that's the objective that I
Yeah.
have in mind. Like with this podcast, the people that we are going to be reaching in the SaaS ecosystem. I think the more insights that you can give, what you've seen in your 8 years of experience, and it's been a
Yeah.
diverse experience as well, right? So would love to, it'd be great to if you can go as deep as possible. It's completely up to you. So nothing like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
we are pretty excited to have you on board on this podcast to get some, because so Kyle has spent a lot, has focused a lot on the paid side of the funnel, right? And which is something that we always love. Specifically, like personally, I really enjoy having the niche conversations where you can talk about someone who has like seen almost everything in that specific domain, right? And it becomes really interesting to understand what and how you approach things, right? So we're going to get started, and you worked in the B2C sector as well, right, Kyle?
Yes.
And obviously, me and the viewers that will probably see this podcast do understand the difference between a B2C and B2B, right? But just a school of thought that I have, like eventually you're selling to human beings, be it B2C, be it
Yes.
B2B, right? So what is your thought? How do you see it differently? What difference that fundamentally that you saw when you shifted to a more B2B marketing side of the role? And
Yeah.
how do you approach the human characteristics that you are, pain points that you want to hit? Like how is it different, or is it the bottom line the same?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So like I started my journey in the B2C side of things, worked with three agencies for almost 4 years. I handled a lot of B2C clients with various sizes in terms of the company, the budget, the kind of objectives they were going for.
Yeah,
And and after that, I wanted to move on to the B2B side to sort of more experience things in-house and how brands work and work with multiple stakeholders, not just within India, but even out of India across different
yeah,
teams and sort of get the whole shebang of things. So one key difference is I think first is the size of your audience, right? Basically a total addressable market. So over there, when you are selling, you have to keep in mind that you are selling to a bigger market in a B2C context. So you
agree.
have more ground to play with. You have a shorter sales cycle in most B2C cases because either say it's a fast-moving consumer good or some service, or basically anything unless it's something that requires a longer sales cycle, which is very rare. But in a B2B setup, sorry, it's more on the lines of multiple stakeholders being involved because if you're buying an enterprise product, it's likely that you're going to have multiple people, and you'll see a lot of stats being thrown around, right? Between 8 to 10 people make a decision before buying a product, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think that is one key factor. More importantly, the way you speak to people, the kind of stuff that they want. Now, usually in a B2C, you can either go the emotional route or the functional route, depending on how you talk. B2B used to initially be only the latter, but if you look at a lot of the new B2B campaigns, people are injecting humor in it, a bit of fun. So I
yeah.
would not, so I would say the line is starting to slowly blur. However, there are stark differences, like I mentioned, in terms of the market, the kind of audiences, and where you need to be present. Yeah. So in a
Awesome.
nutshell, yeah, I think that would be the difference. Yeah.
That's very well put. And you raised a really interesting point for something that I also wanted to ask you, right? So do you see B2B marketing to be boring? So as you mentioned, right, there is a shift
Yeah.
that is happening. Do you think it is important, or do you think because you're selling to businesses, there's a corporate mindset of your target audience when you're, whatever communication that you're doing has to be professional. Uh, where do you see this shift coming in the entire marketing journey? And do you think it is important, or do you think we can still live without it?
No, definitely not boring, I would say, because it all depends on at the end of the day, you're speaking to a professional person, but you have to keep in mind that that person is consuming B2C products just like you and me, right?
Yes.
So they are probably exposed to that marketing already. It's just that
Yeah.
what is their state of mind when they're looking at it? So take an example, right? If I see an ad on Instagram, which is for a B2C product, my mind would be in the different zone because I'm more casual when I'm looking at that kind of a platform, right? But if I'm on LinkedIn, say I'm looking for much more serious stuff. Now there's no direct relation there, but it's just food for thought. So the way I would sort of look at it is that, it doesn't have to be boring because humor is very important. Of course,
Yeah.
it depends on the audience that you're speaking to, right? Because a
That's right.
lot of times B2C products, B2B products, they are here to solve a case that people face, right? So it could
Yeah.
be something as frustrating as maybe looking at too many documents or maybe having too much data. So putting that kind of humor in there is always good. And people resonate that well with it because they're
Yeah.
probably going through it every day in their job. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a very reasonable logic that you've put behind it. Like they
Yeah.
are exposed to B2C. How I say it is that eventually they are human beings, right? So they do
Yeah, of
enjoy
course.
that, the humor or entertainment in general is always loved more than anything else around the globe, right? Like whatever the country or the geography is, whatever kind of people you're looking at, humor or entertainment per se is always an integral part of communities, right? So I think uh, even because B2B is also getting cluttered day by day, and it's growing, right? You need to stand out, and sometimes, as you also mentioned, that eventually it's about how do you make them resonate with the problem that you're trying to solve. So I think if you can put humor in it, I think that's icing on the cake.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it's all about testing at the end of the day, right?
yes,
There's no one size fits all. Some companies might find success with humor, some might find it with more seriousness.
that's
You
right.
have to try. That's pretty much every marketer's kind of gig. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very well put. Thank you so much, Kyle. So one thing that I
Okay.
generally do when I get, experts like you, we've seen a lot in the industry. You've seen a lot of in the paid side of things, right? One, because I talk to a lot of, founders and, people like you in the SaaS ecosystem, right? There's one perception that I've seen, not all the time, but a lot of times that when it comes to enterprise customers, people are confused about how ads play a role, right? When you're targeting
Definitely.
enterprise
Yeah.
customers, they don't know how to utilize ads. One perception, obviously, is that if you're targeting big accounts, they tend to be more expensive. Will it be that case? How have you seen? Like, I'm sure you've worked,
Yep.
catering to enterprise clients, right? And so, how
Yep.
does the ads funnel look like? If you can share some insight on your approach personally, also would love to hear that.
Sure. Sounds good. Yeah. So I think it first starts with the audience, right? Because if you look at platforms like say Google search, right, it's all based on the intent. There could be an enterprise company searching,
That's very
somebody
true.
looking for startups or self-serve platforms, or somewhere in between. So
Yeah,
one thing is, while you can keep scaling that and running that through, it doesn't guarantee that you will strike gold with enterprise every single time. However, the biggest factor in enterprise is your size of audience, which you can get through multiple kinds of platforms, the likes of Zoom Info or Apollo, and enrich the same, right?
yeah,
Now, you have different channels of deployment. So the way I look at it is right. An enterprise customer cannot come from just one touch point. In most cases, you either and I've seen this. There has been one instance where I've seen an enterprise customer talk to somebody at an event. Then they spoke to somebody else from the sales team. They clicked on an ad, consumed an article. Uh, Even one case where there was an enterprise customer that parent company was in another country, but they converted in another country. So they had two different sort of businesses in that point.
nice.
So it's a very complex journey. The bigger the company, I would say,
Absolutely.
because one is there are more decision makers. Number two is there are bigger budgets involved, so the sales cycle tends to get a little longer. But more importantly, it's all about how much you put there, right? You can't be one dimensional. Paid cannot do it alone. SEO cannot do it alone. Content cannot do it. Everything needs to be
True.
tied together at the end of the day. So the way I would put it from the paid angle is the more in terms of being expensive, like you mentioned, right? The more specific you are in terms of going after the audience, that's first ensuring that whatever audience you're pulling out, it's lent to the best possible, right? Because what happens is usually if you take that audience and upload it, you'll find a lot of mismatch. There'll be a lot of challenges. Might be some errors, and then you end up serving a lot of your impressions, which cost money on platforms like LinkedIn, to the wrong audience, and it's not the best use of your money. But however, if you first narrow down and fix your audience, it all starts with the TAM. In an enterprise especially, you need to have your TAM on lock. Once your TAM is on lock, it's defining what your messaging is, right? Because when you talk to an enterprise company, you might have to showcase better stuff. For example, your logos. Now, if you have enterprise logos, they resonate. Okay, if these guys trust this company, we should definitely talk to them. It's also about, how specific your communication, what kind of assets are you putting out? Are you putting out stuff relevant to the industry? Because nowadays everybody just wants to do a generic approach. Generic doesn't work anymore. You have to go industry wide. You have to also, speak to that specific geography, that specific place that person is coming from, and the specific kind of mindset that person might have, right? Somebody in North America versus somebody, say, in India, they, while they're looking for the same product, their buying decision can be affected by multiple factors. So once you narrow down your TAM and you get it in place, then you have to look at different channels, right? Because like I said, you can never directly convert in most cases through one platform. There'll be a multi-touch attribution unless you're probably not measuring that already. So if you look at a platform like LinkedIn, for example, you can definitely upload that and target them on LinkedIn because you can go after certain enterprise companies. You can marry the audience that you pull out with LinkedIn's platform data and then sort of showcase ads there. You have multiple types of campaigns. You can engage them with all forms of assets, and experiment and try. And this is something that even I've done when I was running campaigns on LinkedIn, where I've tried pretty much every campaign that they had under the sun to ensure what works best. But most importantly, it all depends on what's the KPI you're measuring, right? Because LinkedIn, it's not a direct bottom of the funnel platform. It's supposed to work as an influencing platform. And most of the times what I've seen is when companies miss out is they are only looking at it from a direct use case and seeing what's bringing in directly. But what other business might have come, what other kind of customers might have come that got influenced by LinkedIn, that's probably being missed out. So you have to deploy all those measurement protocols in place to see how exactly the channel provides value. Because if you just look at it on a direct cost per lead rather than versus faring against your overall revenue, I think that perception is very important. Then, of course, that's the part of LinkedIn. You also have platforms on ABM, such as your Sixth Sense, your demand base. Now, those help you with much more precise targeting. You can literally reach out to the person in specifics and talk to them. So I think if you're looking at an enterprise model, it's not just about trying to scale and spray and pray, right? You have to be more laser focused to ensure that you get the best bang for your buck.
Awesome. So there were so many questions that were popping up, but eventually you kept answering them automatically. So I actually wanted to ask about, how should we look at different KPIs for different channels and different scenarios? So you already mentioned that. So that's awesome. So I would love to, deep dive into both the primary platforms for ads, right, which is LinkedIn and Google, right? And there are many, I would say, myths about certain things, right, or perceptions, if not myths, right? I can only say for the people I have talked to, right? So that population space is what I've seen, where LinkedIn is definitely a channel that seems very, very powerful, right? But eventually people lose out on it. People lose trust on it. And that happens very quickly, right? Few of the reasons that I have seen is, one is, of course, the cost, right? Which is, I feel with Indian clients, cost is a big problem when they look at US, right? Because it's in dollars and everything, so which way looks very high, right? Second is they've never been able to get like high intent or bottom of the funnel leads, right? Which is obviously, if someone is not really aware of how, just how beautifully you talked about and capturing enterprise clients, people are not generally aware directly, right? And could be the reason that they're trying it out first time or whatever, right? So they the first reflex that anyone has when it comes to, if I'm spending money, I need the return. So I'm looking at high, like bottom of the funnel leads only, right? Which is something that people have seen hasn't really worked on LinkedIn, right? And I have a couple of more specific questions around LinkedIn, but these are two perceptions that people have. What is your approach when it comes to LinkedIn ads? I know you've utilized it. I know that you've had success through it. You've already given a hint in the previous answer when we talked about enterprise, right? Can you elaborate a little more about your approach when it comes to LinkedIn ads? It could be for enterprise, it could be for mid-market.
Sure. So the way I see it is, right, LinkedIn, in some cases, it does tend to bring you stuff. So if you're looking at, say, your overall success from all your platforms, LinkedIn might give you, say, 4 to 5%, give or take, in terms of, opportunities and closed revenue. But the way it is that, LinkedIn is there to enable people. It's there to influence and assist your performing campaign. Uh, Initially, when I had started, I used to also try this bottom of the funnel approach, like you said, right, because of cost and so on. But
Yeah.
it was something that we had to learn and unlearn again to ensure that, we know what we're doing. And then it's also dependent on how the market is changing. Because if you look at it right now in a lot of SaaS companies as well,
Yeah.
everybody is using it as a brand building platform, as a community building platform, right? They are running ads, of course, sure, but a lot of SaaS companies don't just want to do revenue, right? They want to run webinars, they want to do events, and this is where something like LinkedIn comes in, right? Because say if you promote an event on LinkedIn, and if the right TAM and the right audience comes there, and then your event marketing team or your sales team, whoever's present at that event, ends up closing it, you then have to pinpoint it back to LinkedIn, because unless you don't have a multi-touch attribution in place, you're never really going to see that success, because you're kind of blinded by that. So I think the way I would look at it is it all depends on the size of the company, right? Now, when a company is starting out, say it's a seed company or a Series A, LinkedIn might not be the first choice because, like you said, right, if the goal is to bring in as much, you first need to prove success of the channel being paid marketing and then expanding upon it. But if say Google search, right now, Google search, for example, you are limited by your volume. If you get 1,000 search volumes for your brand or whatever keywords you're going after, whether it's your competition or even the industry-based keywords, you are limited by that, right? No matter how much you spend, that's your cap. Unless the market or the industry goes to such a change where volumes spike overnight. But that's really not something that you can always bank on, right?
Yeah.
So the way I would see it is that if you have capped out on a certain channel, you need to open up other channels to understand what is going to help you with. Now, LinkedIn can do all. It's the most important thing in LinkedIn is, right? Any channel for that matters. What is your full funnel strategy, right? Because bottom of the funnel is not a full funnel strategy, wherever you look at it.
Yes. Yes.
In the case of LinkedIn, you want to start, and this is something that even I've also experienced. You start with something as simple as maybe a video. You talk about the company, you talk about what it does. Don't be too salesy in it. Just maybe talk to the person that would likely buy your product based on the problems they face, or based on basic what your product can do. It's more of an explainer, I would say. Then you need to nurture that audience and move them down. Using third-party audiences never really does work, especially in LinkedIn, from what I've seen, is because unless your product has the exact match for what they offer in their audiences, you're never going to find that, right? Because, and this is something that even I've seen. So say, for example, I classify my customer in this industry, but LinkedIn may be not classifying them in that industry. They probably classify them somewhere else. You have a mismatch. You're not never going to see that success over there. So it's a mix of relying on LinkedIn's audiences, but I would say more on your own audiences, because that's where you are going to hit gold in terms of going after the right personas, right? The objective is not to reach out to the entire pool. Even if it's a brand awareness, you want to go to the entire pool that falls within your TAM. So, for example, if say you have an overall TAM of say 10,000 companies, right? You don't want to be going out and touching any one of those, because first you need to lock those 10,000 people and move them down the funnel through drips. Whether it is on the dashboard, whether it's through your email marketing strategy, whether it's through your SDR reach out, it all depends on what stage they're being interacted. Because one key thing that, and even other teams, or even whether it's management or sales, they want to know if I'm reaching out to these accounts, what's being marketed on them. Nobody knows that. But on LinkedIn, you can influence those people and say, okay, this company, for example, company X, I've reached out to them with this ad. They've seen so much of my videos. They've seen so many impressions. So it builds that confidence in the sales team that, if they've seen so much, they've spent so much time, we should be going after them as well. Because what happens is usually people will fill out a demo form, then they're going to forget. They're going to be like, I don't remember filling out this form. And this is something that you see it across every paid marketing platform. Why? It's not because they don't remember filling it in general. It's because there's so much online that it's impossible to have an attention span where you can recollect as many ads as you see.
That's right.
So yeah.
Awesome. So one thing that this one question that I had is related to where you ended with respect to filling up the lead form and forgetting about it. Have you run in lead campaigns on LinkedIn? I'm sure you have, right? In lead campaigns, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So a lot of our clients also, and in general, what I've seen is that because landing pages is an effort, and most of the times with growing startups, it's always urgent, right? So if whatever they plan has to be done very quickly, right? So what happens is that because landing pages is an effort, so in leads is something that solves for that, right? we've tried that with a lot of our clients, right? In lead campaigns, we will get the leads that fall into the tab that the ICP matches, but we never get that reply back, right? It could be a top of the funnel, it could be a bottom of the funnel. Is it something you have experienced? Is simply what I want to ask. If you have
Yeah,
you
sure,
figured
sure.
out
See,
why?
yeah, see, no matter how good your strategies, you'll never get 100% success rate, right? Because there could be so many factors. So yes, definitely I have seen that happen where, there have been so many leads that have come in where they have been exposed through remarketing as well, but they don't end up converting. Now, there could be multiple reasons for that. And here's where the most important factor is having is having a continuous feedback loop. So, for example, if the salesperson has spoken to said prospect and say either they, like you said, they don't remember or the SDR has
Yeah,
spoken, the salespeople need to be aware of what was it that they were exposed to and maybe try to talk
yeah,
to them on those lines as well. Because usually it's sales and marketing first needs to have an interlock, right? Once they
yeah,
have that interlock in place, they are aware of what's going on. So you will definitely find cases. The objective here is not to get a 100% success rate, but to obviously minimize it as time goes by. So understanding, what has worked for you in terms of what kind of ads you've run, putting that out there. What do the customers want to see? Ensuring that, if say, for example, like you said, the customer sees some bit of information on one ad, but in the
yeah,
email sequence or on the landing page or the lead form, it does not talk the same thing. So that language needs to be uniform, right? Because you have to speak the same language across all of
yeah,
it, or they're just going to lose interest. Because you either then I'm confused, or it's too much information. So
yeah.
keeping it simple, and of course with A/B testing, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think that alignment of messaging is very, very important.
yes,
It has to be consistent all around because there's something that I read. So it's got to do with the human psychology and how the attention span is very, very low, right? Wherever you are either reading an email or and it is even lower when it comes to sponsored ads, right? And the brain in these cases works in a very reflexive kind of a manner, right? So the brain is okay to answer 2 plus 2 4, but if you ask him 19 into 328, that kind of a scenario. So generally that alignment has to
right.
happen so that that reflexive mind catches that consistency, and then the user is in that flow where you want him to be. So that's an amazing point. All right. So this is interesting. So one final question with respect
Yeah,
to Google Ads, right? Which is
sure.
something that very honestly, I haven't seen because I haven't got the opportunity to work with a lot of early stage companies. So we've never had there are only a few where, probably just one client where we were able to spend like 200K in a month, right? So I've never seen uh, a lot of scenarios where we are able to scale Google search. Is it how to what extent is Google search scalable? I know you raised a point where it obviously depends upon the search volumes, and you cannot expect a 350 or 500% increment in search volumes overnight, right? So let's say you figured out that there is enough search volume. The competitors are many and they have good, decent search volume. So that is sorted. Till what extent is Google search scalable?
See, I think it all depends on what your targets are, right? So, for example, if scaling the platform is never enough, right? Because if I look at my ad metrics, let's say my CTRs are through the roof, but then what about my conversion rate? Because
Right.
when you say scaling Google Ads, it's not just
The
ensuring that your
impressions.
impression shares at
Right.
100%, your CTRs are above industry benchmarks. No, it's also post lead journey, right? What happens over there? Because ultimately, the company is more interested in how much you're
Revenue.
going to help them close,
Yeah.
rather than just show them that you've given them so many impressions, clicks, so on and so forth. So the way I would look at it is you need to ensure both are running at the same time. You are improving your ad metrics and your business metrics. So when you do that, uh, I don't think scale will ever be a question, right? And see, Google search is such that it all depends on what overall marketing the company is doing, right? Because search volumes are going to increase not just by running paid digital campaigns. If you're doing events, if you have any
Yeah.
communities in place, if there are any
Yeah.
certain uh, sort of seminars, webinars that is being run, it
Even LinkedIn
matters on a
ads
lot of these
impact
things.
the search volume as well, right? When they
Uh,
see
to some
exposed,
extent,
it's all
yeah, to some
like
extent, but
everything.
yeah, yeah, I would not. I would say you need to once again measure it, right? Because when you implement the measurement protocols for whichever platform you're doing, whether it's Google or LinkedIn, it can help you weave that journey and say, okay, this person first came on LinkedIn, then searched
Yeah.
on Google, or vice versa. But until you can't prove that by looking at that pattern, it will be very difficult to really come to that conclusion.
Awesome. So attribution is something, multi-touch attribution is something that you
Yeah.
consistently talked about, right?
Yeah.
And it's been, as far as I know, it's the biggest challenge that the companies have.
Yeah.
Uh, to so were you able to sort it out? And if at all, like what kind of an approach did you take to because this is very tough to attribute. Like they met at an event and then they saw a LinkedIn ad and then talk to a sales guy. So these are very like it is very difficult to get all of these data points together and align them in a user journey. To what extent were you able to do that?
So I
And
still think it's a work in progress, right? Because ultimately, having to do something like this cannot be done just by one team, right? You need to bring everybody on board. So, for example,
that's right.
uh, the most important team here is your marketing operations team, or in general, anybody who's handling your CRM, because they have to ensure that whatever ad information is being passed into the CRM is being done correctly by you. Whatever sales
Yeah.
conversations need to be tracked are being tracked. Whatever SDR meetings and reach outs are being done, email marketing sequences, content. So it's not just one channel, right? It's the overall channel, and bringing that all together is going to help your multi-touch attribution. So when you have that in
Understood that.
place, it's something. It's a lot of groundwork, but it sets you up for success in the future, and it's something that every company would ideally have to pivot to, right? Because what's
Yeah.
going to happen is it's going to have a parity where people are going to assume that there's only one channel that works because they are seeing it on face value, but they're not looking at it from the holistic picture, right? So I think that's a very important thing. When you fix that, it might change a lot of perceptions and help people to trust the other channels much more.
That's right. That's right. Interesting. So yeah, it is work in progress for sure. I think a lot of
Yeah,
with AI also coming in, I think a lot of
yeah.
these the challenges which were not being solved so far might have that kind of a positive impact in place. Awesome. So okay, so you've done so many ads, right? How does your stack look like? Okay, Kyle D'Souza goes into the office sits in for an interview and he's hired. What is your demand? First demand with respect to stack?
So I'll speak of it from a paid perspective first. I mean, it
Please.
depends on what objectives you're looking at, right? Now, when you look at paid, like you said, Google and LinkedIn for almost any SaaS company is kind of there. Then I've also worked with platforms such as G2 and Captera because in B2B, you need to have listing platforms, right? Because that's where the audience is likely to be. They're not just going to
Yeah.
be anywhere else. They're going to be looking at this because that's the community basically.
Yes.
So there are also programs in place for that. Then more importantly, right, the ads I would still say for a paid marketer is never just limited to just the ad dashboard. I've worked on landing pages. I've worked with the creative team, hands-on with them. You need to be intertwined in all of these things, right? Because it's not just about what you own on your own. It's about what you co-own as well with every
Yeah.
single team. Because
Agree.
ultimately, that's what's going to drive your channel, right? The way I see it is that whether it is organic or whether it is paid, those are just enablement channels, right? Without content, SEO is not going to fire. Without the right kind of ads or the right kind of communication messaging, your ads are not going to fire.
True.
Without the right kind of content, email marketing is not going to fire. So you have to have everything locked in place. These channels will work if everything works. Nothing really works in a silo anymore. I think because paid typically brings the fastest results, it kind of builds that
Yeah.
perception that it can work. But that's more of a band-aid approach, I would say. It's not going to solve your problems in the long run, nor is
True.
it going to
True.
help you be a consistent channel. So yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. ठीक है. Awesome. So there are two very generic questions. Now we are coming out of the
sure,
paid marketing, the
sure.
SaaS ecosystem in general, but one final two questions that I have. One is related to something because we also get a lot of young kind of viewers, who are working or building their careers right now. One thing that generally happens in the startup environment in general, not just SaaS, is that you face you have a lot of ideas, especially in marketing, right? Marketing is all about being creative,
Yeah,
being more innovative. So you have a lot of ideas, and initially you have the hunch of certain things working, or you want to try certain experiments or certain campaigns, and it becomes difficult to convince your leadership for that, right? And and as you have been mentioning, right, you have to co-own things. Like it has to be a collective effort, and every answer talked about that, right? So it is of course very important, right? So how do you ensure how did you ensure, in fact, that you are getting them on the same page? Obviously, not all the times would everything that you think of would have been agreed upon by. But how do you put that up? What is the approach, the mindset that you take, and how do you not get frustrated by these instances, which is very important?
Right. So I think it all starts with the conversation you have with them, right? Because first is to understand what are we trying to achieve together, and is everybody aligned on that? Usually, what happens is sometimes people are only going to look at, okay, fine, my job is to only bring the leads in, and then that's somebody else's problem, right? But it's never really going to be like that, because your success is contingent on somebody else's success as well, right? Because ultimately,
That's right.
paid is not a channel that's going to drive revenue alone. There are so many other stakeholders going to be involved, right? So having defining KPIs, having everybody to agree on those KPIs, that is number one. When that is set in place, you then pitch in what can work. And it's not something that you're going to build overnight, right? I mean, it took me years to kind of do that. And
Yeah.
once it gets done, then I think people don't have that doubt in their mind, right? Because everybody ultimately, when typically in paid marketing, and this is even in my experience, when you have the lion's share of the company budgets, the marketing budgets, people are going to pay close attention to you, right? Because they're
Yes.
not just going to, just turn their eyes and kind of let you run with it unless you build that trust with them. So
Hmm.
what you need to first do is data, right? When you talk to anybody, especially at a senior management level, you have to talk with data. You cannot be making blanket statements. You have to tell them, okay, this is what I brought in terms of your pipe, your closures, your opportunities, lead percentage in terms of qualified leads. When you come in with that data, right, that kind of gives you a seat at the table. Then after that, you need to tell them what you've done in your experience, what the
Hmm.
industry is doing in terms of what can be tried out, and what also you feel can be done based on what the company is looking to achieve. When you bring these out, and it doesn't have to be in some fancy PowerPoint slides or anything like that, it just needs to be in a one-pager doc that tells them what they need to know. When you are specific with what you say, right, then I think that the numbers cannot lie, right? You
Yeah.
will go with data, you will tell them what's what, and they'll ultimately, will align with you on it. Because if the goal is to grow, I think it's pretty much going to happen. This is something that I've also have faced multiple times, right? And you will still face it from time to time, because
Yeah.
usually when the numbers are slow, things are down, people kind of start panicking. It's a very normal thing to go through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you what you need to be sure of is how well are you on top of your channel, the consistency in how you execute campaigns,
Yeah.
making sure all your stakeholders, whether it is the in-house teams, the agencies, other stakeholders like sales, SDRs, the developers, whoever is helping you out, you need to make sure that they are all aligned and everything. That basically there should be no blanks in any of these places, because then I think that should pretty much ensure that what you need to do is being done.
Awesome. Awesome. So basically, there should be transparency. Everybody should be aligned and should be on
Absolutely.
the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
page.
There should be transparency. Because when you share, and it's something that I've seen, right? When you are consistent in sharing updates and telling people, right? People are not going to come
Yeah.
and ask you, because you're already telling them what they need to know. It's a
Yes.
report,
Yes.
whether it is a dashboard, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Having that is important, because then it doesn't become, a sort of a hidden place where, people are just speculating rather than being sure of what they need to know.
Right. Right. So thank you so much. I think this is going to be very, very helpful for those who see. I'm going to make sure that this snippet goes out separately also. I think this helps a lot.
Great.
A lot of
Thank you.
freshers struggle in this initial part of their journeys. I'm sure you must have struggled also, and you've learned. And
Yeah.
that's the idea of these, podcasts that I do. That whatever you've learned making mistakes earlier, maybe people can see a few people only might not make those kind of mistakes again. That'll be a big win, right? Finally, so you worked in agencies before, right? And you worked obviously in
Yeah.
corporates, right? um
Yeah.
how do you look at it, like agency versus in-house, if I have to simply put it, right? What is your preference?
Right.
And this preference could be obviously like, where did you enjoy working more? Or what I'm actually trying to get out of you is basically, as a demand gen head in a company, would you rather want an in-house team, or would you want an agency, or maybe both?
No, it's a very good question, and there is no direct yes or no answer to it. But I'll try and answer it based on my experience, because
Absolutely.
I've worked on the agency side. I've also in CleverTap, I've worked in-house building campaigns, and then I ultimately brought on an agency as well. So I think
Yeah.
I've worked enough to sort of try and
Exactly.
answer this question. So
That's the reason I
here's how
had
I
this
would
question.
see it. Right? Yeah, yeah. So here's how I would look at it. Right. First, it all depends on where the company stage is at. Right. Now, if the
Mhm.
company is just growing, you might either, if they have the capability to hire somebody in-house, which usually they do because they want to keep lean teams and have
Yeah.
somebody set up everything, then you might want to go the route of in-house until you have ensured that you have a proper marketing budget in place. But even if you have a marketing budget in place, right, it all depends on what are the trade-offs you get with both. So in my
Yeah.
experience, when you bring on an agency, the benefit you're going to get is continuous and rigorous execution, right? Because this is something that I unfortunately, if you have to scale ahead and look at other things to grow and strategize, you can't be sitting in front of a dashboard executing the campaigns all day, right? Because that will take at
Agreed.
least 70 to 80% of your time to ensure that
Yeah.
you are not missing out on anything. So you can either bring somebody else internally or have an agency. But the advantage of having an agency there, I would say, is you're not just bringing an agency to execute, right? You're bringing them on as a partner because they have
Yeah.
so many like-minded clients, like-minded employees that
Yeah.
have that experience and can add that value. If that is happening, then you can definitely look at the agency route, right? But if, say, you are more concerned with agility or with turnaround times or confidentiality for that matter, right? Because no matter
Yeah.
no matter how good your agency is, how close you are, there are certain things you just cannot give them, right? Whether it is confidential data for customers, revenue, so on and so forth.
Agreed.
So it's a mix of both. So I think the way it is that you should look at what the agency is going to solve and how much of it you want to solve in-house. It should be a balance of both. I would say ultimately that should be the goal, right? Once you've reached that sweet spot, where you built the core team needed in marketing internally,
Yeah.
and you are at a healthy place in terms of your revenue. You want to look at a balance of both because the agency will definitely help you, but it's not going to replace an in-house team or vice versa. So that's how it has been in my experience, and I've seen a lot of success there because if I've brought in the correct agency that has done it, can take care of it, it takes a big load off my mind, so I can focus on more internal stakeholder management, right? Because
Right.
that's where the next step of growth is going to be. Because if I have to scale, I have to be talking to the other people, whether it's the product
Yes.
marketing teams, whether it is the sales folks, or even the product folks for that matter. They're going to
Yeah.
help me in feeding that information back into my campaigns and to the agency to ensure that we're taking it to the next scale of growth.
Amazing. So basically, when you reach at a certain stage where you have, to an extent, stabilized your go-to-market strategy or marketing strategies, and things are going well, and a certain funnel at least is working out, right? You get an agency as a support system so that you can take the next leap, right? As an individual, as the head of the marketing, you can take the
Yeah.
next leap, and okay, now I can focus on building another set of funnel because we cannot stop scaling, right?
Yeah, because see, I mean, ultimately, right, the company is also going to grow, right, and you are also going to
Yeah.
grow in your career. So
Right.
it's only logical that you can. Some people prefer to bring the agency right out get go, right? But then what
Yeah.
happens over there is you need to ensure that your agency ultimately is not going to replace your decision making, right? You still have to feed them with inputs,
Yes.
give them continuous feedback, and tell them what to do because I don't think having an agency just to hold the fort is going to really work in most cases. It might take you from 0 to 1, but if you want to get past that, you have to treat them like a partner and you have to work with them daily. Like when I was, even with me, right, I ensure that there is some form of communication with me and my agency every day, whether it is a call, a Slack message, or a weekly catch up, whatever it is.
100%.
You just have to have that. You have to carve out some of
100%.
that time. When you do that, right, it leaves less room for mistakes and also ensures that people are on top of things, and plus it gives you a chance to brainstorm with them as well because ultimately a lot of clients that they can share learnings from, of course,
Yeah.
based on what they've seen work, what doesn't work,
Yeah.
and you can also bring in your experience and they can learn from you as well. Yeah.
Agreed. I completely agree. I think I'm on board. I think that is how we also try to position ourselves as an agency. I think it makes absolute sense. It is not just for the execution sake. I think as a strategic partner also you should look at agencies, and I completely agree with 0 to 1 is a different scenario. The scenario in between is different, and then later on it's absolutely different. So these are different scenarios that you're in, and you need to judge when you need an agency. I think I kind of agree with you that you should have certain things in place before you get a partner on board, and have that kind of at least the initial control so that you know where you want to head, because at the end of the day you are the one who's going to decide, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it should be a balance between two, right? Like
yeah.
you should not have no in-house and only agency or vice versa. It all depends on where you're planning to head. I think that, yeah.
Amazing. Kyle, thank you so much. That's all from my side. It was amazing, hearing you talk about all of these things about the paid and demand gen funnel. These are the kind of insights. Exactly, this is what I wanted and expected coming out of this podcast. I would like it. It would be great when I start distributing this because these are certain questions that a lot of people have. At least I would say the people that in my network in what I am trying to build. I think there these questions pop up a lot, and you beautifully portrayed and talked about everything in detail. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for sparing time and coming here and talking about such great stuff. Thank you so much, Kyle, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much, Ishan. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed having this discussion, and I'm sure we'll have many more like this.
Absolutely. And I think you're great for podcasts and webinars. I think people should invite you a lot more. I think the way you talked about, I initially, when we started off, I said it, that's not really important, but I don't think that's really a point for you specifically. I think you were very smooth, very clear, very straightforward about, what you're talking about. Of course, you know what you're talking about. You've spent so many years in the industry, but the way you portrayed it in the most simplistic manner, I think people who even just starting out would be easily able to understand what you're trying to say and learn from your experience so far. So thank you so much for that, Kyle, and definitely we'll have a lot more and we'll catch up soon as well.
Thank you, Ishan.
Thank you, Kyle.
Bye.